Hey guys, it's Kat and I'm back today with my July check-in for my 1 month, 1 palette series. Now, if you're not familiar with this series, I pick an eyeshadow palette that I've had in my collection for a while, and to stop me from buying more stuff, I'm going to give love to old palettes, and I focus on a palette a month. So I choose a palette, I use it pretty much exclusively, almost, not quite. So I have to use the palette at least 3 or 4 times a week, generally more like 5 times a week in the makeup look that I create, and I need to use every single shade throughout the month, and then I report back and let you know what I think about the palette after using it quite extensively. And I go through the shades, I tell you what I think about them individually, what I think about the palette as a whole, and show you the eye looks that I've created throughout the month, some of them, and also recreate my favorite look that I did during the month, which is the eye look that I'm wearing now and I create at the end of this video. So this month I used the Urban Decay After Dark palette. Now I do have to say this is my 7th video in this series, and I would have to say this is probably the hardest palette I used. Not because it was like, okay, I'll show you the palette. Let's do that first. So this is a palette that came out I think last year from Urban Decay, or end of 2016 I think, and it's an all shimmer palette and it's mainly colorful. Now when I say colorful, there is a brown, there is a gold, there is sort of like this sort of white that shifts a yellow color, there's like more of a muted purple, one of those green brown sort of colors. So even though it is mainly colorful, they're very muted colors besides maybe these two, and maybe the purple, and they're easy to work into a daily look. So yeah, colorful but not like rainbow, if you know what I mean. With this palette, since it is all shimmer, I did have to delve into other colors, other palettes to make it work. Now I do love shimmer eyeshadows, so this palette for me wasn't scary. I know a lot of people love mattes and they look at a palette like this After Dark palette and they go, oh, I don't want to use that. But for me, I love shimmers. So all I did was pair it with my June palette that I used, which was the Steeler Eyes of the Window Soul palette, which has some mattes in it, and I did this video last month if you want to see what I think of this palette. So I mainly just reached for the cream matte to like set my base or blend out a color, and then some of the transition colors depending on the look. So that's pretty much what I reached for from this palette, just to sort of make this palette complete. So in previous videos, I mainly used the palette that I was focusing on exclusively, but in this particular month, there was not one day where I used this palette without pairing it with another palette. Okay, so you might be thinking, why was this palette so hard to use if I'm not really scared of the colors and if I'm not really scared of the shimmer finishes, and I paired them with mattes anyway? Now, the reason why I found this palette difficult to deal with was because the shades are kind of boring. And I do remember when I first got this palette and I had this issue with it, was that Urban Decay, often you think are very buttery, very bold, quite shimmery eyeshadows. These were a little bit lackluster. Now, an example was, I remember swatching in store Lounge, which is a beautiful blue, was it blue-brown sort of shifty color. I remember swatching that in store next to the Single, and the Single was like mind-blowingly gorgeous, but this was like a muted version. Same as Backfire. This is like a muted version of the Single. So I feel like that when Urban Decay did this palette, they put in like some shades that a lot of people knew about, some like beautiful looking finishes and beautiful looking colors, but they didn't deliver with the pigmentation and the shimmery finish, if that makes sense. A lot of these look very dull on the eyes, and I will talk about looks that I created which demonstrate how dull these were. So for me, if I reach for a palette like this, I want it to be quite wow. I either want it to be quite bold in color, bold in finish, really beautiful to work with, and I found that maybe besides this Fringe color down here, they were pretty lackluster, and for me, it made this palette harder to work with because it wasn't as fun or as inspiring as I would have liked it to have been. Okay, so let's start with talking about Alter, which I think when they call it Alter, it might be because it's one of those shades that can alter another look, because it sort of looks, I don't know, like champagne or champagne yellow in the pan, but it's got a sort of yellow shift to it. Okay, so I'll swatch this one. They swatch quite nicely, so you can see if you swatch it, hopefully you can see there, maybe not, but it's got like a gold shift to it. So it's one of those sort of white bases with a gold shift. Hopefully you can see that there. Now this shade wasn't bad. I did find that it looked quite chalky on me, so sometimes I used it on the inner corner. I did attempt it all over the lid, and I don't know if you can see in these photos, but I don't see any shimmer. This almost looks like a lemon matte shade. So is it a pretty shade? Sure. It's okay, but I think it looks better swatched than it actually looks on the eyes. And when I talk about this sort of being alter, it could be more of a transforming shade. If you did pair this over a black, it would give, it would alter the black to have like a gold shift. So I see the point of it, but I'm going to compare it to another palette that I really like that has really metallic shades. So this is Too Faced Chocolate Gold palette. And when you look at these shades, these are true metallic. So I'm going to get a color that's sort of not similar, but it's a gold. And if we swatch them together, you can see how one reflects a lot of light and looks like a shimmer, and one almost doesn't look like it's even there. So I sort of expect that when I get a palette that is all shimmer, mainly color, I want it to pack a punch like this. Otherwise, I think it's a pretty bland palette. And you can see that that white kind of gold color, you can barely even see it on camera compared to the Too Faced Gold, because the Too Faced Gold is glorious and this is like meh, meh. So yeah, the feel of it, the application of it was fine, but for me, the way it looked on the eyes, it looked a little bit ashy or chalky, which is strange because I have quite fair skin, so if something looks sort of chalky on me, it's going to look chalky on a lot of people. I just feel like that didn't have the sheen or the reflect that I was sort of expecting from an all shimmer palette. And that's sort of a theme that I noticed throughout this whole palette. Scene is also a similar type thing. It's like a peachy shade, and I think it's like a peachy pink. It is a nice sort of soft pink with a kind of gold reflect. All right, I've just put Alter and Scene next to each other, so you can see, you know, they do have a bit of light reflect, and Scene definitely has more of a pink base color, but they still have a very, very soft finish. So you can see with the photo on the screen that I did wear this quite a bit just as an all over the lid color with a bit of mascara. I think it worked really well as just sort of a natural look. Did have a bit of sheen on it, did have a bit of color, but it wasn't anything super, super bold, but it was still very pretty. I also paired this with a bold liner, and the photos are pretty bad, so ignore that, but you can see that there is a bit of shimmer in there, and it does have add a bit of color. So the dimension on that shade was quite pretty. It was one of the better, I think, shades in this palette. All right, the next shade in the palette is this shade here, which is Supersonic. It's like a burgundy sort of red color, and I think it does perform very well. So it's got a nice amount of pigmentation. It does blend onto the skin really well. You can build it up and have quite a bold look, or you can blend it out and it looks quite orange. So for me, I found this to be a funny one because it depends on what you want. But if you want a very orange look, you just put it with a fluffy brush or just put a small amount on. But if you want it to look more true to the pan, you really do have to build it up. I used this color twice this month, and I created like a burgundy look where you can see I built this up quite a lot to get the color. It was a pretty color. It worked well. You could see that it had a nice vibrancy to it. And then more recently, I used it along with the dark blue shade in the palette to create this look. Now, this look is a little bit more different. It's a little bit more fun, but it worked really well with the blue as well. So even though I'm pretty sick of these red colors being in palettes because they're sort of like overused these days, what I really did like about this particular red was it can work with warmer shades. So you can work it with browns, you can work it with, you know, golds. It works really well, or you can work it with these cooler shades, and it's sort of like, I would say, a neutral red. It's not too orange, it's not too purple. It's sort of one of those versatile colors. So yeah, I didn't actually use it too often. I used it twice, one on its own and one paired with the blue, and it worked well each time. It's just not a color that I particularly like to reach for too often, but it performed quite well. All right, then on to a color that I really did enjoy. This is Sinful. So this is sort of like an old gold color. It's got a similar texture to the last two that I showed. So it's quite pigmented. It is quite, does have a bit of a sheen to it. And I did use this all over the lid once. I found it to be too yellow for me. So if you see it swatched, it is a very, very pretty shade. It is very, very yellow for a gold. And so when I used it all over the lid, I thought it looked a little bit jaundice, a little bit harsh, but I particularly liked using this on the inner corner, and I'm wearing it on the inner corner today. I'll show it to you at the end. It works really well with some of the colors in this palette. So if you were, you know, trying to pair it with that red or that brown or, you know, most of these colors, I find that that gold is a really beautiful way just to add a pop of brightness to a look, because if you add these two colors with any of these, it's sort of, I don't know, mutes the color a lot, whereas I find the gold sort of brightens it, it sort of amplifies it. One color that I did actually use a lot was the brown, which is called Off Duty. I'm using it on my eyes today, and I love brown eyeshadows. I love shimmery brown eyeshadows. So this, for me, I was so glad to see it in the palette because it's sort of like my go-to. Now, I don't know if you can see, you'll definitely see at the end when I'm applying this, even though when you swatch it, it looks like it's got some shimmer. When it is blended out and applied, it looks really, it almost looks like a satin or a matte. So there is very little, like there's definitely light reflection when you build it up, but if you apply it softly or apply it with a brush, it just sort of fades to a normal brown. Now that's perfectly fine, and what it means is that this brown you can use sort of as a transition color if you wanted to, or you can mute some of these other colors in here with it. So yeah, I like the inclusion of the brown. I used it quite a lot, but for me, I love a shimmery brown with a lot of like reflection, so it sort of not only sort of adds contours and depth to the eye, but it also brightens where the light catches, whereas I found that this one didn't do that. It was just a bit of a kind of brown. Worked well, it applied nice and smoothly, it just was a bit of a basic brown. All right, the next shade, which is Druggy, which I don't like the name, this purple here, it looks like a fun purple. It's quite a lighter, cool tone purple, so it's got a bit of blue in it. This did not apply well. It looks all right because it's quite soft, but it just, like, I'll swatch it here. You can see it's quite translucent. It is a nice color, but if you apply it with a brush, so if you apply with a brush, it is one of the most lackluster purples I've ever used in my life. It is just not good. Now, you know, you could always wet your brush, you could always pat it on, but even then, this is not very pigmented. It's just sort of, I don't know, it's like a wash of purple. So I did use this once, and the look that I created I quite liked, but I think I liked it because I put it with a purple liner. Now this look that I created, I also used the brown just on the inner part, just to sort of add a little bit more color, and I put the purple on the outer part. But once again, the purple looks so faded. I just expected a little bit more from this particular palette. So, and I found that this was a, you know, a sort of common thing with this palette, that it looks really fun and vibrant, but there's only a few shades that actually deliver that vibrancy. The next shade, which is more of a warmer purple, Backfire, is also the same. This was the first color I used in the month, and I was like, oh God, this is gonna be a hard month. So once again, it's got the same issue. And then if you apply with a brush, it's even worse. Like, that is just, it's a nice color, but if you look at the color in the single, it is so much better, and this is just so sad of a purple. So if I put it on with a brush, once again, it's just a very, very sad purple. So I found the purples were horrible, which was a shame because Urban Decay is known for purples. It's like, that's their color. So you can see in the look that I created, which I think I applied a little bit of matte black with it, it looks very, very almost nude. There's a little bit of color, but not much. I also used Altered, which is that light shade I talked about first, on the inner corner. You can see that this doesn't actually add any metallic sort of shimmer to the inner corner. It just adds a little bit of lightness. So I found that these colors are a little bit wishy-washy. They did create a pretty look, but they were just so muted that I almost, yeah, I was disappointed by the pigmentation and the finish of it. Lounge is also the same thing, where Lounge in the single form is very, very amazing. It's reflective, it's bold, and in this palette, it swatches quite nice, but once again, it's got the same problem as those last shades, where it looks more sort of satin. It looks, there's a bit of color in this one. That beautiful reflect that gives the brown that sort of green look just isn't vibrant enough for it to be special. And I will put a photo hopefully on the screen of what this looks like compared to the single, because the single is fantastic and this is just like, I don't know, it's just a fancy brown. Swatched as well, you can see that it does apply quite smoothly, but it is like brush swatch, but it's just quite lackluster. So this was one that I used once again. I actually really like the look that I created, but I tried very hard to build that up and make it look interesting. So hopefully you can see on the screen the look that I created using this. I did apply this with my finger to really build it up. It does look very pretty, but you need to build it up quite boldly. And there are a lot of shades out there that have this same sort of color shift and they just do it a lot better. And in fact, Urban Decay themselves do it better in the single. So this was a little bit sad. I do think I have Ulta on the inner corner of that one as well. All right, one of my favorite shades in this palette, and probably the only reason in the future why I'll be reaching for this palette, is Fringe. Now this is quite firm in the pan. It's not as soft and buttery as the other shades, but it's a very beautiful shimmery teal. Now once again, this is shimmery, but it's not super reflective. So sometimes I've used this and it looks almost like it's a matte on the eye. So if you just want to add this color to a look without it really adding too much color and reflection, this does it really well, because it almost has like a satin finish, but you can mainly see the color. The color is what is beautiful about this. It's very, very intense. I applied it in the outer corner today with the brown, and it applies very, very well. It applies really well with a brush as well. I'll get a brush. So hopefully you can see that this does apply quite boldly with the brush. So it looks a lot better. Look at that. A lot better than the purples and the other colors that are on the lower line of this palette. This is sort of what I wanted the rest of the colors to be like. Very, very bold, really easy to apply with the brush and build up the color and really look as like true to pan. The others didn't do it. This one does it in spades. It's a beautiful color. So the look on the screen, you can see I mainly just use this as like an accent to complement the liner that I was using. And I also used the brown and the gold from this palette, but I just think this color, it almost outshone the other colors that I used. It just was gorgeous. It's very, very wearable. It looks like it's very intense but easy to work with, and I would definitely reach for this palette more just for that color. Okay, Paralyzed, which is a last shade. It's more of a dark true blue. This one is probably, it's quite a nice color. Once again, I like this color because it's sort of like a neutral blue. It will work with most colors in this palette. It will work with browns. It works with the red. I've got a look on the screen where I use this with the red. And if you swatch it, it is quite nice. It's a little bit soft and flaky, so I'm just worried about it all falling out on my jumper. It's not as pigmented as the teal. And you can see that the brush swatches, once again, aren't as bold as the teal, but are definitely better than the purple. This is a color you can build up. I didn't think that this color was as bold and as interesting as it looks in the palette, because in the palette it looks very, very vibrant. But I think the good thing about it is that it works well with other shades and it was quite easy to apply. So, you know, if you don't want the blue to overtake a whole look, you can just apply a small amount just to sort of deepen the outer part of the eye. If you want to build it up, you can, but it did require a bit of building up to get quite intense. So in my time with this palette, I didn't love it. I sort of just begrudgingly used it. I did create some looks that I liked, but it either took a bit of work or it was a bit of a fluke because the colors on their own just aren't that great. I would reach for this palette again, mainly for that teal color and that gold, because I think the colors are really beautiful. I think they work really well together. The look that I create on my eyes today, and I show you at the end, you can see how easy they are to use and how well they do work together. But I just didn't love this. I found that half the shades just were lackluster, and I've got much better shades in my collection. And I sort of expected for a nighttime sort of going out colorful, vibrant, shimmery eyeshadow palette, there would be more, I don't know, guts to it. There was just, a lot of them were really wishy-washy, and I would have to say that probably the best performing shadows, Scene, Supersonic, Sinful, Fringe. I would say the ones that are sort of like average would be Off Duty. I used it a lot because I liked the color, but I just thought the finish was a bit boring. And I think also Paralyzed, you can make it work, but once again, it takes a little bit of building up and work because it's just a little bit and the shades I just didn't like was Alter, Druggy, Backfire, and Lounge. They can create beautiful looks, but they require a little bit more work. And I think for a palette that's supposed to be bold, shimmery, colorful, I don't think that it really hit the mark. I also think it didn't hit the mark with previous Urban Decay quality that I've seen. So I've seen some really beautiful eyeshadow palettes coming from them, and their sort of shimmery, deeper shades like this tend to be the best performing shades. So I don't know why they sort of cheapened out and had some really shit shades in here, because it was not the best to work with. Easy to apply, but the effect wasn't very inspiring, if that makes sense. And it got to a point where I'd used like all the shades sort of individually, that I started mixing them. Now, I have to say, I think mixing them, I enjoyed this palette more because I could create some sort of more neutral, interesting sort of looks. The one on the screen that I've got here, I actually mixed Scene with Lounge. So just to clarify, Scene is that peachy gold color and Lounge is that sort of blue brown color down the bottom. So I mixed those two for that look, and I thought those colors ended up looking really pretty. On the screen, you can see more of a sort of old gold bronze look that I created, and I thought this was a really beautiful look. This is sort of my favorite all over the lid color. It's sort of like, yeah, like an antique bronze color, which I really like. And to create this look, I mixed that same green, that Lounge, with Sinful, which is the like yellow gold. So I might actually put on the screen the reminder of what Sinful, which is that gold color, looked like all over the lid. It was a little bit too bold for me, but when I mixed it with a bit of Lounge to make it a little bit more, I don't know, neutral, or a little, take away some of that yellowness, it made it look a lot more wearable. So that's sort of how I ended up using this palette a lot, was I mixed and matched different shades. So normally I walk away from these sort of videos and I will take a palette that I thought might have been a bit boring, or that I just hadn't used much and wanted to try a bit more, or hadn't used for years but used to love, and I sort of rekindle my love for a palette. Whereas this palette, that didn't happen. I think the more I used it, the more sort of frustrated I got with it. The only silver lining for me was when I actually used that teal color, and I realized that that is definitely probably the most impressive color-wise shade in this palette, and I actually was re-inspired to use this palette. Leading up to that, I was just like, oh, how do we get through this? So it wasn't so much the colors or the fact that it was just a shimmer palette. It was more just the fact that I expected more from them. And I had used this many times before, so I knew that I was expecting too much, but it was just reinforced by trying to use these on a daily basis, and you put a purple on your eye and you're like, that doesn't even look like purple, what's the point? So yeah, some of these shades were good, most of them were just average, and yeah, I am happy to say that I don't need to use this palette for another quite a long time, but that teal is glorious, and I will definitely, if I want a good shimmery teal, I will reach for this, but that's probably the only reason I will reach for it. Okay, before I show you that teal in action, to show you how beautiful the teal can actually be on the eye and how easy it is to achieve a beautiful teal look, I want to let you know what I will be using in August. Now, because I was really craving a beautiful metallic look, I'm like, I just want a metallic wash of color on the lid. I don't want to have to build it up. I don't want to have to apply it wet. I don't want to have to apply it with my fingers. What are you doing, Urban Decay? I kept thinking about this palette, the Too Faced Chocolate Gold, and I kept thinking, I really want to use this. I got this in December, and since I started doing this series in January, I was like, the whole time, I'm like, I want to use this palette. I want to use this palette. And I think now in August, this is a good time to use it because I'm inspired by beautiful shimmers. I was going to go deeper palettes because it's winter. I was going to use the Kat Von D, the Christmas palette from last year, the Satan Sinner palette, was it? But I am not featuring Kat Von D on my channel because I don't like the fact that she's not vaccinating her child. So I'm not going to feature that. I'm going to feature this instead. So yeah, I'm going to be using the Too Faced Chocolate Gold all of August. My goal is to use every single shade in there at least once, and to report back with the looks that I create and my thoughts on the palette overall after I've used it primarily all month. And I'm very happy about this one because it's got the basic 4 sort of matte shades in there that can help ground a look and make all these kind of shimmers work cohesively, so I don't feel like I'm going to have to reach for any other palette, which is great. So this is a palette I'm using in August and I'm looking forward to it. So yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to August, and then it will be spring for Australia, so I might start pulling out some more spring sort of inspired palettes. So yeah, keep watching if you want to see how I got this eye look, which was my favorite color combination I created from the month, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye. All right, time for the eye look, and I'm just using an IT Cosmetics Bye Bye Under Eye Illuminating Concealer as my primer. This is just in medium. I'm just trying to pan this, so I'm using it any way, shape or form to use it up. And because the After Dark palette is all shimmer, I'm going in with my Stila Eyes of the Window Soul palette, which I've pretty much been using pairing with this palette all month. And I'm just using the cream to set the concealer, and I'm just going to use that sort of warm color in the crease. So I'm going to go the brown all over the lid, I'm going the gold in the inner corner, and the teal sort of on the outer part of the eye. So those 3 colors there. So I'm starting just with the brown and just putting that all over the eye. This can have a bit of fallout, so it's best to sort of just tap it on and not sweep as much, but it does apply quite nicely. And I'm just putting that a little bit on the sort of first half of the eye, lower lash line as well, because I'm going to put the teal there, but I do want some brown underneath this section. And because I just tend to slap on my makeup really quickly, I'm just blending out those edges. I'm not super precise with my eyeshadow, just as long as it sort of ends up looking even and moderately blended, then I'm okay. But you can see from this brown what I was talking about in the video. It is a nice color, it is quite pigmented, but it looks like a satin. There's not much shine to it. I'm actually just going to put a bit more of that brown just with the fluffy brush to change the shape a little bit. But you can see that it does just apply like just a standard brown. It's nothing super metallic, it's nothing super shimmery. If you probably just saw me on the street, this would sort of look like almost like a matte brown even. So yeah, for a shimmery palette, this wasn't super shimmery, but you know, this is a nice brown, so that's good. Now, one of the best performing shades is that teal color, so it's Fringe. I'm going in with just an e.l.f. brush. This is a black one, and the reason I'm going for that is these colors can stain brushes. I've got a few brushes at the moment that the white brushes, like the white bristles are stained, so black is often really good. This is very pigmented as well, so I'm just sort of starting pretty soft. You can see that the teal really packs a punch. Once again, it's not super shimmery, but it is a beautiful sort of vibrant teal color. And synthetic brushes are really good at applying this as well. Probably if you want a more diffused look, you know, maybe go a fluffier brush. If you want it a little bit more intense, go a sort of firmer brush. But this does apply really easily. It builds up really nicely. I like that amount of color because on a daily basis, I could easily get away with that, no problem. I will sort of blend that a little bit better a bit later on with the brown brush, but you can see that it just holds itself really well. So this is a really nice performing teal. So yeah, if you wanted it soft, you can sort of just blend it on a little bit like that, but it's pretty intense. Like, it's a great teal color. Fallout's not the best, oopsie daisy. I'm going to just clean up this fallout a little bit. I do want to point out that when you're filming a video, it's generally, things don't go as well as they would if you're just sitting, you know, doing your makeup normally, because I find that when I'm filming, I have to hold my mirror quite far away so it doesn't get in the way of the camera. So I find that mess often happens more when I'm filming than in real life. So when I did this look, it just worked really easily like this, but shit can happen. But yeah, I like the amount of teal, but I'm just gonna put a bit more brown in there because I want it to be a little sort of pop of teal, not to be the absolute dominating color. So I'm just blending that. This is the same, no, it's not the same brush I was using with the brown, but it's similar. There you go, dirty 2 brushes for no reason, but yeah, I'm just putting some brown back in there to make it more of a wearable look. I like the teal sort of being mainly on the bottom and in the outer corner. And just with that brush that I use with the matte shades to start off with, I'm just blending that a little bit. I've got no product or no extra product on this brush. It's just more to blend out the edges. I actually want a tiny bit more teal just right in that outer corner. So I'm just building a tiny bit up because I really like that teal color. It's probably, in my opinion, the best performing shade in this palette, and it's really, really pretty. Then with a smaller sort of detail brush, this is the Morphe M213, whatever, I'm going in with Sinful, which is that sort of old gold shade there. And I'm just sort of packing that on the inner corner to add that brightness in there, because the brown doesn't, it doesn't have enough sheen in my opinion, so it doesn't sort of highlight on its own. It just looks pretty matte and sad. So this kind of gold not only works really well with the brown, but it also works really well with the teal. Like the colors just go really well. Fallout again, whatever, we'll deal. But I'm just building that up. So you can see that that brown is almost gone. It's really only here, but it's more of the base to work these colors in without them looking too sort of like tropical fish or, you know, over the top. If you've got this bright yellow color and this teal, all of a sudden, if you've got brown as a base to work on or brown in the middle, it just makes it a lot more wearable than if you put the teal and then the gold. That would look a little bit harsh. This just makes it look a little bit softer, which I really like. So I like the brown being in this palette. So with that look, I did use a teal liner. I've just got my Inglot gel liner in 66. It's my favorite teal color. And I put a little bit of Duraline in there because it's quite dry. And this shade works perfectly with the teal. Such a beautiful liner shade. You can see it just sort of complements it perfectly. And I'm also putting that just on the, what is it, lash line? No. Tight line? No. Waterline. Yay! Got there in the end. All right, liner's done. I'm just gonna go in with some mascara. I'm just using the Balm Mad Lash Black Mascara. We'll add that on. All right, so that's the look with mascara. Now I was going to add lashes, but I don't think it needs it. I think this mascara is pretty damn good at providing a bit more like volume and length, which is the point of mascara, hooray. But this is the final look. It's sort of like peacockish, but like wearable. I really like it. You could do this color combination with black liner as well if you didn't want the teal, but I just really like teal liner. So glossy lips, sink ships. No, they don't. But that is the look. So thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.